special envoy to North Korea has stressed the importance of steadily developing traditional friendly ties between Pyongyang and Beijing. That's according to state media reports from the regime, and the envoy is said to have even presented a gift for Kim Jong-un to a senior North Korean official.
Chinese President Xi Jinping's special envoy will visit North Korea on Friday and is expected to meet with North Korean leader Kim Jong-un.
Thank you very much. During our visit, President Xi pledged to faithfully implement United Nations Security Council resolutions on North Korea and to use his great economic influence over the regime to achieve our common goal of a denuclearized Korean peninsula. President Xi recognizes that a nuclear North Korea is a grave threat to China, and we agree that we would not accept a so-called freeze-for-freeze agreement like those that have consistently failed in the past. We made that time is running out, and we made it clear, and all options remain on the table.
Questions have been raised about how heavily sanctioned North Korea is funding its nuclear and missile programs. On Sunday, Japan's Mainichi Shimbun may have shed some light on who is helping support the rogue regime. Its reportage took readers to Namibia's capital, Windhoek. A local Namibian claimed that some 50 North Koreans had helped build the new Ministry of Defense headquarters. After the UN had found out about Namibia's violation of UN sanctions, the country announced that all North Koreans were to stop construction as of June last year. Yet North Koreans continued working for some 10 months after the announcement, under new arrangements with the Chinese construction company called Qingdao Construction. Mainichi Shimbun pointed out North Korea and Namibia's strong ties, which date back to 1960s, are behind the regime's lucrative activities in the African nation. According to a report last November by the Institute for Security Studies based in South Africa, trade between North Korea and African nations averaged $90 million a year from 1998 to 2007. But after 2007, when the UN Security Council imposed heavy sanctions on North Korea following its first nuclear test, there was an increase in trade, with annual trade averaging $216.5 million a year between 2007 and 2015. The Mainichi Shimbun wrote that African nations claim it is unfair to solely blame the North for its nuclear ambitions, as there are other countries with nuclear weapons. Meanwhile, U.S. Secretary of State Rex Tillerson on Friday called for African nations to actively engage in the implementation of UN sanctions on the regime over its nuclear ambitions. Tillerson claimed, quote, "The only way to achieve true security and respect from the international community is to abandon its current path and choose a meaningful dialogue about a different future."
President Donald Trump is set to announce this week on whether the U.S. will designate North Korea as a state sponsor of terrorism to further pressure the regime over its nuclear and missile developments. White House Press Secretary Sarah Huckabee Sanders said last Thursday that Trump would come to a final decision by the early part of this week. National Security Advisor H.R. McMaster had already hinted at the move prior to Trump's recent visit to Asia, citing the assassination of North Korean leader Kim Jong-un's half-brother in Malaysia earlier this year, among other offenses.
That is an option that's under consideration, and so the president's cabinet is looking at this as part of the overall strategy on North Korea.
North Korea was first put on Washington's list of terror sponsors in 1988 after it planted a bomb on a South Korean airliner, which blew up and killed 115 people. But the designation was removed in 2008 after Pyongyang met several conditions related to a nuclear disarmament deal. As of now, the only countries that remain on the list are Iran, Syria, and Sudan, barring North Korea's possible reinstatement. Some have argued that the move would have tangible effects on the regime's finances, already suffering from heavy international sanctions over its continued defiance of UN Security Council resolutions. Others say, however, that relisting North Korea as a terror sponsor would be more symbolic than anything else and unlikely to have any significant economic impact.
Prime Minister Abe and I agreed on our absolute determination to remain united to achieve the goal of denuclearize North Korea. Shortly following our visit, Japan announced additional sanctions on 35 North Korean entities and individuals. Japan also committed to shouldering more of the burden of our common defense by reimbursing costs borne by American taxpayers, as well as by making deep investments in Japan's own military. This will include purchases of U.S. advanced capabilities, from jet fighters to missile defense, systems worth many, many billions of dollars, and jobs for the American worker. Prime Minister and I also discussed ways we can deepen our trade relationship based on the core principles of fairness and reciprocity. I am pleased that since January of this year, Japanese companies have announced investments in the United States worth more than $8 billion, 17,000 jobs. Thank you. Oh, they don't have water. That's okay. What? Oh, it's okay. Oh. Japanese manufacturers, Toyota and Mazda, announced that they will be opening a new plant in the United States that will create 4,000 jobs. We also signed agreements between our nations to enhance infrastructure development, increase access to affordable energy, and advance our foreign policy goals through economic investment. From Japan, we traveled to another key American ally in Asia, the Republic of Korea. My official state visit to South Korea was the first by an American president in 25 years. Speaking before the National Assembly of the Republic of Korea, I spoke the truth about the evil crimes of the North Korean regime, and I made clear that we will not allow this twisted dictatorship to hold the world hostage to nuclear blackmail. I called on every nation, including China and Russia, to unite in isolating the North Korean regime, cutting off all ties of trade and commerce until it stops its dangerous provocation on, and this is the whole key to what we're doing, on denuclearization. We have to denuclearize North Korea. We have ended the failed strategy of strategic patience, and as a result, we have already seen important progress, including tough new sanctions from the UN Council. We have a Security Council that has been with us and just about with us from the beginning. South Korea agreed to harmonize sanctions and joined the United States in sanctioning additional rogue actors whose funds have helped North Korea and North Korea's nuclear and ballistic missile programs. It's unacceptable to us. The United States welcomed the decision of President Moon to remove the payload restrictions on missiles to combat the North Korean threat. And together we reaffirmed our commitment to a campaign of maximum pressure. Like Japan, South Korea is increasing its defense contributions. During our meetings, President Moon acknowledged his desire for equitable cost sharing for the United States military forces stationed in South Korea. And I visited soldiers at Camp Humphreys, a brand new joint American-South Korean base, paid for almost entirely by the South Korean government. At that base, I discussed with the United States and South Korean military leaders both military options and readiness to respond to North Korean provocation or offensive actions. During our visit, President Moon and I also discussed America's commitment to reducing our trade deficit with South Korea. At my discretion and direction, we are currently renegotiating the disastrous U.S.-Korea trade agreement signed under the previous administration. It has been a disaster for the United States. Last week, 42 South Korean companies announced their intent to invest in projects worth more than $17 billion in the United States, and 24 companies announced plans to purchase $58 billion in American goods and services. From South Korea, Melania and I traveled to China, where, as in Japan and South Korea, we were greatly honored by the splendor of our reception. Our trip included the first official dinner held for a foreign leader in the Forbidden City since the founding of the modern China, where we enjoyed a very productive evening hosted by President Xi and his wonderful wife, Madame Peng. During our visit, President Xi pledged to faithfully implement United Nations Security Council resolutions on North Korea and to use his great economic influence over the regime to achieve our common goal of a denuclearized Korean Peninsula. President Xi recognizes that a nuclear North Korea is a grave threat to China, and we agree that we would not accept a so-called freeze-for-freeze agreement like those that have consistently failed in the past. We made that time is running out, and we made it clear, and all options remain on the table. I also had a very candid conversation with President Xi about the need to reduce our staggering trade deficit with China and for our trading relationship to be conducted on a truly fair and equitable basis. We can no longer tolerate unfair trading practices that steal American jobs, wealth, and intellectual property. The days of the United States being taken advantage of are over. In China, we also announced $250 billion worth in trade investment deals that will create jobs in the United States. From China, I flew to the city of Da Nang in Vietnam to attend the leaders' meeting for APEC, Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation. There, I spoke to a major gathering of business leaders where I reminded the world of America's historic role in the Pacific as a force for freedom and for peace. Standing on this proud history, I offered our vision for robust trading relationships in which Indo-Pacific nations can all prosper and grow together. I announced that the United States is ready to make bilateral trade deals with any nation in the region that wants to be our partner in fair and reciprocal trade. We will never again turn a blind eye to trading abuses, to cheating, economic aggression, or anything else from countries that profess a belief in open trade but do not follow the rules or live by its principles themselves. No international trading organization can function if members are allowed to exploit the openness of others for unfair economic gain. Trade abuses harm the United States and its workers, but no more. No more. We will take every trade action necessary to achieve the fair and reciprocal treatment that the United States has offered to the rest of the world for decades. My message has resonated. The 21 APEC leaders, for the first time ever, recognized the importance of fair and reciprocal trade, recognized the need to address unfair trade practices, and acknowledged that the WTO is in strong need of reform. These leaders also noted that countries must do a better job following the rules to which they agree. I also made very clear that the United States will promote a free and open Indo-Pacific in which nations enjoy the independence and respect they deserve. In Vietnam, during a state visit in Hanoi, I also met with President Quan and Prime Minister Phuc to discuss the growing friendship between our countries. Our Vietnamese partners are taking new actions to enforce sanctions on North Korea. In addition, we committed to expand trade and investment between our countries, and we pledged to address the imbalances. I am particularly pleased that the United States and Vietnam recently announced $12 billion in commercial agreements, which will include $10 billion in U.S. content. Finally, I visited the Philippines, where I met with numerous world leaders at the U.S., ASEAN, and East Asia summits. At ASEAN, the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, we made it clear that no one owns the ocean. freedom of navigation and overflight are critical to the security and prosperity of all nations. I also met with the prime ministers of India, Australia, and Japan to discuss our shared commitment to a free and open Indo-Pacific. During our visit, President Duarte of the Philippines thanked the American people and our armed forces for supporting the recent liberation of Marawi from ISIS. We pledged to strengthen and deepen our long-standing alliance. At the East Asia Summit, the United States negotiated and signed 4 important leader statements on the use of chemical weapons, money laundering, poverty alleviation, and countering terrorist propaganda and financing. And crucially, at both summits and throughout the trip, we asked all nations to support our campaign of maximum pressure for North Korean denuclearization. And they are responding by cutting trade with North Korea, restricting financial ties to the regime, and expelling North Korean diplomats and workers. Over the last 2 weeks, we have made historic strides in reasserting American leadership, restoring American security, and reawakening American confidence. Everywhere we went, I reaffirmed our vision for cooperation between proud, independent, and sovereign countries. And I made clear that the United States will be a reliable friend, a strong partner, and a powerful advocate for its own citizens. The momentum from our trip will launch us on our continued effort to accomplish the 3 core objectives I outlined: to unite the world against North Korean nuclear threat, to promote a free and open Indo-Pacific region, and to advance fair and reciprocal economic relations with our trading partners and allies in the region. We have established a new framework for trade that will ensure reciprocity through enforcement actions, reform of international organizations, and new fair trade deals that benefit the United States and our partners. And we have laid out a pathway toward peace and security in our world where sovereign nations can thrive, flourish, and prosper side by side. This is our beautiful vision for the future. This is a future where this vision, this dream, is only possible if America is strong, proud, and free. As long as we are true to ourselves, faithful to our founding, and loyal to our citizens, then there is no task too great, no dream too large, no goal beyond our reach. My fellow citizens, America is back, and the future has never looked brighter. Thank you, God bless you, and God bless the United States of America. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you all.